go in there because, because we had to, because we tried to start a conversation twice now, but, the internet connection was too bad. I've had the snippets of what's happened, but now that we're just starting this afresh, everyone listening now and watching haven't. So let's just go in and explain what happened to you and why I received your details of you being known as a walking quadriplegic, and how you inspire Oliver Sinclair, who's also losing, has lost a lot of functionality in his body through his multiple sclerosis. So let's just start from that place of where I had no idea about you and how it is you came to be known, not known, but how you had the accident. Let's talk about the accident.
I broke my neck in 2003, 21st of November 2003, which was a Sunday. I've always been a motorsport person, so we'd been racing in the morning with the Porsche Club, and I picked up my car on the way home from a friend's house and went around the corner at 60 k's an hour and unfortunately hit a wet patch in the road. I just remember coming around the corner and the back of the car sort of flicked out a bit, and it seemed very sort of casual and very slow, and I thought, oh, okay, no problem, it'll sort itself out. The road in front of me was pretty straight. I had about 100 to 200 meters of straight road in front of me, and although the sort of car was sliding a little bit at the back, I expected it to straighten itself out and just stop, and that would sort of be the end of it. Unfortunately, it started veering to the left and looked like it was going to go up a bank. And if it had gone up the bank, I felt it would have rolled. So I flicked the car into a spin in order that it would sort of take some of the energy out of it and sort of spin down the straight road and come to a grinding halt. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. It spun down the road probably 15, 20 times. The steering wheel snapped out of my hand, so I couldn't hold on to it. And I sat there like a passenger on a roller coaster, and still very calm. And it all seemed to be very slow, like most things do when you have an accident. It seemed all to be in slow motion. But I still thought it was just going to stop at the end of the road and I'd get out and that would be it. Unfortunately, the back wheel slid down probably about a 3 or 4 foot bank on the opposite side, on the right-hand side of the road into the sugarcane. And as it slid down the bank, the rear wheels then dug in, and the nose of the car then flicked over backwards. So I went sort of nose over tail, as it were. So I did one back flip, and then it rolled back onto its wheels. So one back flip, one side flip. The moment I saw the sky through the windscreen, I knew that I was in trouble. I knew that I was rolling or flipping, and it wasn't going to be a good thing. And unfortunately, I didn't have my seatbelt on. In stupidity, I'd literally, my friend's house was probably 1.5 kilometers down the road. I'd reversed down his driveway without my seatbelt on, and I'd sort of got on the road and put some music on and just forgotten to pull the seatbelt over. Left me loose and flying in the car, as it were. So while the car was doing its flipping and rolling, I went upward and my head connected with the front windscreen pillar, which then sent shockwaves straight through my neck, instantly shattering the bones in my neck. And the car landed at a sort of on its wheels, but at a sort of angle leaning towards the passenger seats, as it were. So it was sort of probably at it tilted, and that caused me to, my legs were still in the driver's seat and my bum was still sitting in the driver's chair, but my body was flung into the rest of my body was pushed into the passenger seat, as it were. So I landed lying across the passenger seat with my face pushed up against the passenger door panel, and instantly couldn't feel my legs, couldn't move. Was in excruciating pain because my right arm, which was sort of hanging towards the driver's side, literally felt like it was broken in 100 places. The pain going through my arm was incredible, and that was obviously the nerve pain because the nerves were trapped in my neck. And there was a lot of blood because I put a dent in my thick skull on the roof of the car, so that, you know, when you have a head wound, there's always a lot of blood.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of blood from the head, and I sort of landed, and then that was a life changed. You know, straight away, lying there, quite strangely. The first thing I thought of was we were building a race car at the time, and it still doesn't make sense why I first thought of this. But the first thing I thought of was, am I now going to have to change the controls to drive my race car? And that was literally the first thought I had when I landed. We'd raced 3 weeks before from Cape Town to Sun City in an event called the Fireball, and one of the guys there was paralyzed and driving a car. And the first thought when I landed was, am I now going to have to change the car that we've been building for the last few years to allow me to drive it? So very weirdly, I was calm for, I'd say, probably the first 10 minutes in the car, sort of just sitting there thinking, okay, what's happened, trying to take it all in, trying to work out how I was going to get out of the car. And also I couldn't really see because the way the car was on the side, the windscreen was broken, the back window was broken. The car was at a bit of an angle, and down a bank. So I was still sort of looking straight. I was looking where I could see. I was sort of looking up the dashboard, as it were. So I couldn't really see where I'd landed, how far down I'd landed in the sugarcane. Was I so far down that no one was going to find me, you know, off the road? Was I going to be stuck there? And then I don't know whether you want to call it panic or frustration, but then the frustration sort of set in. And I wiggled around and tried to move, and eventually flung my right arm sort of up somehow, and it landed on my leg. And when it landed on my leg, I felt it. And I thought, okay, that's weird. I can feel my legs. This can't be that bad. Obviously, I've just, you know, done some sort of damage. I didn't think broken neck or anything like that. I just thought, well, obviously I've done some sort of damage. I've still got sensation in my legs. I can still feel my legs. So although I can't move them, I must just be trapped in a funny position. And that was, it felt like about 15 minutes, but probably was closer to 5. And then a security guard from one of the complexes had seen me go off the road, and he stopped a car, and a gentleman came down. I still don't know who he was, but a gentleman came down and then sort of said, okay, he would call somebody as an ambulance or whatever the case is. And I got him to redial my phone so the friend whose house I just left could then come to the scene of the accident. So, yeah, that was how the accident happened.
So tell me, what car were you driving then?
It was a BMW M3 at the time, which is a fairly fast car, and all people sort of, it's got a bit of a bad reputation, and people sort of, the moment you mention M3, they think, high speed and whatever the case was. And it literally wasn't. It was literally at 60 k's an hour. It was a total freak accident. Under most circumstances, I'd say 99.9% of the time, even if the car had veered off the road, it wouldn't have rolled. It would have just slid into the sugarcane. It just happened the way it went off the road, and the angle that it went down the bank caused it to go sort of over backwards, and that was the issue. You know, I've been in accidents at a way higher speed where, in my youth, where I've walked out of cars with minor scratches, you know, and no permanent damage. Just the way, as I always say to people, the takeoff was beautiful, the in-flight was fantastic, the landing not so good. So,
and you weren't wearing a seatbelt, which was actually, Yeah.
And I wasn't wearing a seatbelt, which, I think in all honesty, you know, people always go on about seatbelt. But I do feel that if I was wearing a seatbelt and I was in that position in the car where I couldn't move, I wouldn't have hit the roof. And I probably would have walked out of the accident, in all honesty, without any serious damage. So, yeah. You can call it an error of judgment. You can call it anything. It was fate. I'm not a person that normally drives without my seatbelt. I always had my seatbelt on. It just happened. I reversed down the driveway. And, you know, when you're reversing, you're turning backwards, you don't have your belt on. And I was literally a kilometer from where the accident happened. And I'd just forgotten to put it on. Literally.
Sure.
Fate.
Yeah.
So
tell me, when you were lying there, you say you were just lying there sort of processing everything for about 10 minutes. Did you think that you were, because you said you pulled your arm over and then you felt your leg, but what was going through your mind? Like 10 minutes is a long time.
Yeah, frustration more than anything else. I just wanted to get out the car. I literally wanted, I suppose I still thought I could untrap myself from the position I was in and get out the car and have a look at how badly damaged the car was. I mean, the car was my pride and joy. I was devastated that the car was probably damaged. You know, my next sort of step, my next step literally, and I was literally, if someone hadn't have come, I was probably minutes away from trying to pull the passenger door handle, which I was pushed up against. And I felt that if I managed to open the passenger door, I could roll out the car into the field and then get up and assess the damage. If I'd managed to accomplish that, I would have probably, my head would have probably fallen off. I mean, my neck was in such a fragile position as it were. If I'd certainly managed to do that, I guarantee I would have done way more damage than I already did. You know. And when they eventually found me, I mean, when they eventually found me, I was lying in such a bad, uncomfortable position that I forced them to put a towel around my neck and lift me up so that I was in a sitting position in the passenger seat. And the friend of mine, you know, people always say, oh, you must never move a person with a broken neck and whatever, a suspected broken neck. But I was in such severe pain and I was so uncomfortable that I just wanted to sit up to try and what I thought would alleviate the pain. And as they sat me up, it felt like the two parts of my body separated. It literally felt like the top half of my body and the bottom half of my body tore apart. And I think that's where I did the most damage, was insisting that I be moved. And maybe if I hadn't have done that, things would be different. But you can't sort of dwell on things like that. I always say that I'd wriggled around so much, I'd probably caused so much damage anyway. It is what it is. You can't sit there and spend the last so many years thinking about it. It's done. It's one of those things. Get on with it, you know.
So the frustration, because I haven't heard you actually say this, but the frustration was that you were trying to move the whole time. Because the picture I had in my head when you were first
100%.
explaining it, you were trying to move, but you moved your hand. Okay.
Yeah, and to move my hand, literally, I mean, I probably tried to do that for the whole of the 5 minutes. I just couldn't move. I was trying to get my right hand up and reach across to the driver's door handle and pull myself up into a sitting position. Yet my right hand wouldn't move. And I put my right hand down to the fact that it wouldn't move, that literally my arm was broken. And my wife always says I'm the world's biggest drama queen. So my wife, my arm just wasn't broken. It was completely shattered in at least 100 places, according to me. When I got to the hospital, I made them x-ray my arm, although they could clearly say they could see there was nothing wrong with it. I insisted that they x-ray it because I was convinced it was definitely broken. Meanwhile, there was nothing wrong with it. It just felt that way because the way the nerves were trapped, all the pain was going through my arm. So
wow, that
was the only pain I had, was literally in my arm, because the nerves in my neck were trapped in a position that they were forcing the pain through. So my arm was in terrible pain. You know, even after they gave me all the drugs and the whatever, I was in pain for 5 days in hospital from that, until I had surgery and they untrapped the nerves. So
So then, while you were in the car, did you think then, I'm paralyzed, or did you think that?
No, not at all. I mean, even, I still don't think I'm paralyzed. It's a little bit weird, and I'm very stubborn and I don't know, maybe a bit too thick-headed. But for me, I've never looked at myself as being paralyzed. The only time, funny enough, that I do feel paralyzed is when I fall out of the wheelchair, or I'm on the floor and I have to sort of crawl to the wheelchair or crawl somewhere to get back into the wheelchair. Over the recent years, that's changed a bit, because the more gym I do, the stronger I am, the easier it is to get off a position into the floor, back into the wheelchair. But the only time I do sort of feel a bit paralyzed is when I'm on the floor. Even in a wheelchair, you don't kind of feel paralyzed because you're still quite mobile. You can push the chair around and you can move. I can jump on and off furniture. I can jump in and out of a car. And I can obviously stand with a walking frame and walk. So I remember being in rehab. I was in rehab for about 3 months, for the spinal injury. And I remember the one morning, another guy who was a paraplegic, we went to the gym in the morning, and we were allowed to train in the gym before anyone got there. And as we went through to train into the gym, our names were all on the board in the office where we went to get the keys for the gym. And my name was up there, and I was listed as a quadriplegic. And I thought, huh? That's weird. Quadriplegic. That's like means you can't do anything. Yeah. I'm not a quadriplegic. What are they on about? And it was just a little bit of a shocker that they'd sort of. And I remember saying to the other guy, dude, they've listed me as a quadriplegic. That's not right. So I've always thought that I would be able to walk. I'd never lost the sort of belief that I'd be able to walk. And I still, 17 years this year, I still believe that one day I'll walk without the walking frame. Wow. I don't know why. I believe it one day will just happen. I'll get stronger, and I don't know. Maybe it's stubborn, and they say that, you live in denial, and it's one of the things that with any major trauma, they say that denial is a big thing, that you're going to go through all those stages, the depression, I won't say I haven't been depressed, but I get more angry than anything else, and then I feel guilty for being angry because I'm lucky in comparison to so many people. And I do realize how incredibly lucky I am. I drove here this morning to speak to you. I go to gym 3 days a week on my own, in my own car. I still have a job that's not affected at all by this injury. As long as I've got a telephone and I can talk, I can do my job. So I wasn't a mechanic that suddenly couldn't get to work, or a bus driver, or whatever the case was. Although we didn't have medical aid, we had access to money. So we were able to get decent medical care and pay for what we needed. A lot of people can't. And I know how lucky that is. And then I had a house that was wheelchair accessible. We made very, very slight modifications, and I could get around the house. And I had an incredible family and incredible support, and a girlfriend at the time was stupid enough to marry me, which I think she still regrets. I gave her the opportunity to leave at the time, and she missed her opportunity. So, she stuck with me now. And, I was lucky enough to have a great support team. And I always believe that the people around you are way, way more affected by this than the person that has the injury. They've got to always... You can have a meltdown whenever you want, because you've suffered a traumatic injury, and if you decide you want to have a meltdown, people kind of understand. However, the people around you are there to hide. They hide their emotion because they're trying to be brave and be strong for you. And, you know, I always believe it's way more harder for like your parents and your other half and your siblings and your friends. I mean, a lot of people couldn't visit me in the hospital. They just couldn't see me in a wheelchair, and they couldn't bring themselves to accept it, and just disappeared out of my life because they, you know, for them it was too much to accept, that you know, seeing other people were as normal as they'd ever been and treated me the same as they'd ever treated me. But strangers treat you totally differently. Totally differently. You know, people I used to see in the gym I used to train 5 days a week in the gym before the accident, and people I would see on a regular basis, that we've always been brought up to be polite and greet people. So if I see you 5 days a week in the gym, as I walk past you, I say hello, and I don't have to have a conversation with you. I just nod my head and say hello because you're a familiar face. I've seen you every day, and that be you a man or woman, a young, it doesn't matter. The people I saw regularly, I'd always greet. And I found some of the people were quite weird, quite offish, at sort of saying hello or whatever. And the moment I had the accident, their attitude changed. People were all over you and inquisitive, and I think because maybe they felt guilty for staring at you, and then all of a sudden, because you'd seen them stare at you, they suddenly had to come over and ask you something. You know, but you certainly get treated totally differently, you know, being in a wheelchair or whatever the case is.
Funny. So tell me what, you talk about work, and you obviously, you're very aware of, you know, you're very grateful for your position, but you also see it that way. You choose to see it that way. Just tell us a bit about what you do and how you do make money, and, you know, what's that side of your life like?
I'd like to say I'm a bank robber, but obviously, you know, running out of the bank is not a profession for me.
No,
I know. I have. Yeah, look, you know, I'd get caught quite quickly. But I'm sort of. I have two companies. I run an import-export business where I buy and sell various commodities all over the world. That was my main core business, and I also used to buy and sell Porsche spares as a hobby, which has now turned into my main business. So my main business is I buy and sell Porsche spares all over the world, and I do that from my house. So I've got everything set up at home, and as I say, as long as I've got access to an internet and the phone, you know, I can get on a computer, and obviously these days with the internet, you can manage to do stuff like that. So I've always been fortunate enough to literally, while I was in rehab, I was doing import-export deals because my customers were still talking to me, and I still had my phone, and I was still able to organize to get stock moved. And you know, I'd just make a phone call and say, somebody's coming to pick up that order, or we're sending a truck, or whatever the case is, and they'd pick it up and pack it and send it overseas. It's fairly easy to organize with the phone. And that's always been a plus. It's been a massive bonus, because literally people, their lives, their careers, you know, everything is affected. So I always say to people, when you're chatting to someone in a wheelchair, just think of where you're sitting at the moment, and imagine if where you're sitting in your little office or your place of where you're sitting, imagine if you were stuck there now in a wheelchair, and suddenly you're in a wheelchair. Are you in a double-story house? Could you get downstairs? Would you have to move house? Your current career, could you do what you do now, or would you have to change your job? Would you be able to get to the bathroom in a wheelchair where you're sitting now? Are your corridors wide enough? Would you be able to get down to where you last left your car parked? You know, if you suddenly think about those things for 5 minutes, it changes your whole perspective, because a lot of people will say, oh, hang on, I can't get to where my car is. I can't get to my bathroom because I wouldn't be able to get into my bathroom with a wheelchair, because there's just not enough space in my bathroom. There are 4 stairs to get into, you know. and then throw something in the mix, sit on your hands. And now all of a sudden you've just been promoted. You've gone from being a paraplegic to a quadriplegic because now you suddenly can't move your arms.
Yeah.
Your nose is itchy. Can you scratch it? No, you can't. You have to get someone to scratch your nose. You have to get someone to feed you, someone to shave you. All that suddenly has changed. And I can do a lot of stuff. My wife says I'm useless, that I can't do most of the stuff, but I can do a lot of stuff myself. She's convinced that I'd die within a week if she wasn't around. I think I'd last slightly longer than a week. But no, she's convinced I'm pretty useless. When I first had the accident, I literally, I sat down. I was lying down at the time in a hospital bed, but I said to her at the time, look, in all seriousness, we've been together for 8 years. You didn't sign up for this. This wasn't something that we expected to happen in our lives. And I really feel that it's not fair to expect you to stick around. And if you left, I wouldn't have an issue with it because I would understand it. And I meant that in all honesty from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah.
And she took one look at me and said, dude, seriously, you hardly did anything before the accident. It's not going to make any difference to the amount that you do. I do everything for you anyway. So, yeah.
And tell me, because you don't have kids, huh?
No, I've never wanted. I don't dislike children, but I've never been a kid person. Fortunately, I met somebody who felt the same. My wife has never really wanted kids. So we've got lots of animals. We both share a very serious passion for animals. And we've always had a lot of dogs, and she's got horses. And at one stage, we had a bull for probably 13 years. We had a pet bull, which we raised from 3 days old to 13 or 14 years old. So we've had a lot of animals which we consider our kids, and never really wanted children, much to my mother's great disappointment. She nagged for a long time, hoping that there would be some grandkids. But it didn't happen. So, and definitely not going to happen.
But so, I mean, and that is would that be possible if you wanted it to happen now, like hypothetically?
Yeah,
or is
100, hypothetically, hypothetically, yes, certainly still possible, but not something that I've ever wanted, and which is fortunate. I think if you're in things like that in a relationship are a breaking point for a lot of people. You want kids, the other half doesn't, that type of thing. So fortunately, we had common ground there, and it was never, ever something that either of us wanted. So it was, a great thing. So, But
so
that's another thing. I mean, people... People, that's another thing. I mean, somebody who wanted kids and got into a position where they couldn't because of an accident, that could also break up a relationship. So,
But tell me, does it when you I mean, it's just a very straightforward question here, but does it affect? I spoke to Oliver about this actually, and because we had to break our interview into 2 parts again because of the internet problem. He was quite open about this, in terms of, taking Viagra, or, they get help in certain ways, in that department.
Yeah, obviously.
But is that, do you need that, or is that a separate muscle? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, look, I mean, you don't need it all the time, and it certainly is, a separate thing. But everybody's different. As I say, that's the way where injuries are so weird that certain people, nothing will work, and other people, certain things will work. It would always be possible for me to have kids if I wanted to. Sure, I can't swing off the chandelier, like I potentially used to. So maybe, maybe the last 5 pages of the Kama Sutra are sort of impossible now, and handstands are out. But you adapt, like anything. People learn to adapt, and they say you never know what you can achieve until you're pushed to that limit.
So it's funny you're saying that, right? So I interviewed someone recently, and Jeffrey Deskovic, and he was imprisoned for a very long time, falsely accused of rape and murder. And he was saying how, he couldn't think of anything worse. Actually, so he talks about jail and how jail was, just the worst thing that could happen. But he referred to being in an accident and maybe becoming a quadriplegic being even worse than being wrongly accused and going to jail for doing something you didn't do. And it's funny how when you're in that situation as a human being, you handle it, and the question or the debate is it because of the way your mind is programmed or, from before, or is it that you choose, okay, I'm not going to let this get me down, and it's a choice at that moment, and then you react from there. It's interesting to analyze, where does the strength come from for people to then get through it? Does it come from the pre-programming from before, or is it a choice in that moment, and then from there, you react accordingly?
Yeah, look, I've always been an incredibly stubborn person, and I've always been a person that never likes to be told what to do, and, also doesn't like to be told I can't do something. So I've had previous things in my life where somebody has said, oh, look, you'll never be able to do that. And that kind of annoyed me, and I try and go out of my way to prove them wrong. I had two physical challenges during the course of my disability that people were convinced I wouldn't be able to do, and I, in both instances, proved them wrong.
What were those?
It's weird. One of my... the first one was I used to do a lot of physio in Durban, because when I first had my accident, all my therapists, I was at a hospital in Durban, so all my therapists were in Durban. So I used to travel to Durban every day. I had somebody who could drive me in those days because I couldn't drive myself. So we had a friend who we employed to drive me, because my wife runs my wife is superhuman. So she runs the farm on her own and literally does everything. So she would get me ready in the morning, and then a friend would pick me up and take me to physio and drive me around for the day, bring me home and drop me off at home. And then I would eat and then go off to gym. And it got to the stage where I was able to drive myself, and I was with one of my therapists driving in Durban one day while they were building Moses Mabhida Stadium. And as we were driving past on our way to physio, I noticed that people could walk up the arch, or the construction workers were building the arch. And I noticed them walking up the arch. And I remember saying to her, hey, that's cool. People can walk up the arch. We should do that one day. And she sort of looked at me and said, sorry, what, dude? I said, the arch. We should climb the arch one day. I mean, people can... She said to me, seriously, how many steps can you actually walk up with that walking frame? I said, I don't know. Let's go to the gym and find out. So off we went to Kings Park Gym, where they had a double staircase and an elevator, a lift. And I said, right, let's see. Well, I think I managed to climb 17 steps in probably an hour by dragging myself up with my arms. So basically, I held onto the rail and just pulled myself up the steps. And my right leg never really lifted properly, so I sort of would put all the weight onto my left leg and sort of swing my right leg as much as I could to get it onto the next step. And off I went. And by the end of 17 steps, I think it had taken me nearly an hour. And I was literally exhausted. Wow. I mean, my hands, my arms were totally exhausted, because I dragged my whole body up using my arms. Yeah. And she turned around and said to me, right, that's 17 steps. Moses Mabhida is over 500 steps. Do the math. So I said to her, it's not a case of doing the math. We'll do some training and we'll do that in a year or so. And it became a little bit of a sort of standing joke, as it were, and somebody else heard about it. And I was quite serious about it. So we changed our training pattern, and what we used to do was we'd go to Kings Park instead of doing sort of any sort of type of exercise that we'd been doing in the past. We'd go to Kings Park and we'd climb stairs, and that's all we do. So we drag myself up the stairs and go down in the lift, and she would go down in the lift with the walker or meet me at the top with the walker. And then we go down the lift and back up the stairs again. And we did that until I could do more and more stairs. And I was quite adamant that I was going to do it, but I don't think anyone believed that I was going to do it. And a friend of mine who was one of the top X-ray doctors in Durban, a guy called Stuart Kidgel, Stuart and I raced 3 weeks before the accident. We used to race together. So 3 weeks before the accident, Stuart and I were racing together. And then when I had my accident, Stuart was the doctor on call when I was wheeled into the X-ray. So he was the doctor on call who saw me with my broken neck and had to break the news to my family that I was in very, very bad shape and there was no way I was going to walk or be able to move from the neck down. So while I was in rehab, it was in the same hospital that Stuart was in. I used to jump in the wheelchair and go up to Stuart's end of the hospital and say to him, look, check, my finger's working better, or you don't know me, I'm going to walk. And he used to always be quite amazed at how much functionality was coming back and how determined I was to get out of the wheelchair. So I kept in touch with him. And when I managed to stand, I told him, and he was very shocked that I could even stand, never mind walk. And sort of over the years, I'd sort of said to him, this is what I was, able to do. And the fact that I could stand and even walk sort of 2-3 steps on a walking frame shocked everybody. And the Moses Mabhida was in 2012. So my accident was in 2004, sorry. And I just got bored. Physio had got boring, gym had got boring, exercises got boring, and Moses Mabhida became a challenge. And the fact that no one believed I could, no matter who tells you, oh, no, they believed I could do it. None of them believed it. Not one person believed I could do Moses Mabhida except me. And we just trained, and Stuart then decided he was going to get involved. And Stuart and I went and had a meeting with the guys at Moses Mabhida and explained to them what we were going to do. And they were so thrilled and so accepting. For them, it was the best thing they'd ever heard. They welcomed us with open arms. They gave us full access to the stadium. And we had a lot of things that not only my physical problems overcoming it, but the steps up to Moses Mabhida don't have a rail. So you walk between two concrete arches, as it were, but there's no handrail. So I can't climb steps like that because I've got nothing to hold on to or nothing to pull myself up with. So we got a friend of ours who builds custom exhausts to build us a handrail that we could move. So the handrail was in 3 pieces. And basically, I had 2 people behind me, and as I passed the first piece, they unclipped it and then ran to the front and clipped it onto the front of the rail so that the rail was a continuous rail for me to pull myself up on. The story started spreading around that I was going to attempt Moses Mabhida, and people started wanting to get involved. And we decided to make it a charity event and raise money for the Quad Para Association, for spinal cord, the rugby players, the guys involved in the Chris Berger, Petra Jackson rugby players spinal cord fund. Because where I was training at Kings Park, one of my trainers used to do Pilates with the rugby guys. So she knew quite a few of the rugby guys who'd seen me training. I wasn't a rugby fan at the time, and sort of got to know a few of the guys who wanted to get involved. And then we donated to Highway Hospice as well, because I've previously had cancer. So we wanted to also donate to Highway Hospice. And yeah, we trained for, I think, about a year beforehand, and then climbed Moses Mabhida in May of 2012, if I remember correctly. And got up the 550 steps in just over an hour.
Wow, in just over an hour.
Raised just over an hour. I always curse because when I had my accident, there was a volunteer paramedic who worked literally for himself up in the highway area. So he used to drive around working as a volunteer for a group called VIMA, which was volunteer people like paramedics who used to do, in their own time, drive around helping people that were injured.
Yes.
And he was the one who rescued me from the car and helped me out of the car. And I kept in touch with him over the years. And when I climbed Moses Mabhida, I invited him to come along to climb the stadium with me. So he climbed the stadium with me, with another paramedic, both in their full-blown paramedic uniforms, basically as my medical support team. And I always laugh because I always say that Shannon, the guy that the paramedic, I always say he was more unfit than I was, and the second paramedic was for him and not for me. But he kept stopping me and checking my blood pressure, and he was very concerned about what I was doing and that I would be okay to do it. And I always tell them they slowed me down, that I could have done it in under an hour if they hadn't kept making me stop to check blood pressure and that. So Moses Mabhida, although it was a triumph for me, I always, in the back of my mind, feel it was a little bit of a failure because we could have done it in under an hour. And that's just sort of the way I am. I look at things like that, and I feel you can always do better. And one day I'll go back to Moses Mabhida and do it in half an hour because I believe I can. So
tell me, do you think this whole idea and the science or the medicine behind, when someone becomes paralyzed or, severs a part of their spine, or do you think that that's old-fashioned, or not old-fashioned, but like an old way of thinking to then conclude it and say this person will never walk again? Do you think that is an old way of thinking now, because there's so much to be said now for the power of the mind and, the whole epigenetics exploration these days and how you can change your genes? And so what's your idea of that?
Yeah, 100%. I think that a lot of things like that, it's all about attitude. So like anything else, if you decide in the morning that you really don't want to go to gym because you really don't feel like it, when you get to gym, it becomes a struggle because you really struggle through every exercise because you really don't want to be there. You just want to be home and tucked up in bed or whatever the case is. So whatever you go into, if you go into any task at all, not only something like a spinal cord injury, if you start off with the wrong attitude, you're already crippling yourself. You're already hindering the possibility of you doing anything. And incomplete spinal cord injury is literally, it's incomplete. It's not a guaranteed 100% severed spinal cord and there's just no hope. But the problem being is when you go to a rehab facility, and it's not really the people's fault at the rehab, because they're seeing not only you, they're seeing hundreds and hundreds of patients all the time and all different patients. They get very accustomed to the attitude of, let's just get him into a wheelchair and functional, and let's just get him to be able to transfer out of that wheelchair onto a toilet because he needs to be able to do that, and out of a wheelchair into a car, if possible, because he needs to be able to travel to go to wherever. So their main focus is basically that and only that. When I was in rehab, we insisted on having what they call passive movements on my legs, which although I couldn't move my legs, I wanted them still to move my legs for me. So we insisted on passive movements, and there was a big uproar about it in the rehab because they said, why are you so insistent on passive movements on your legs because you're never going to be able to move your legs. So stop worrying about what's going on with your legs.
Did they say that to you? They said, Mark, why are you wasting the staff's time? You're wasting the physio's time.
100%. So that was the attitude. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of good people and a lot of caring people and a lot of great people that helped me while I was in rehab. But the attitude in rehab literally was, let's get him functional into a wheelchair and let's get him functional, being able to get in and out of a car and on and off the toilet. He will never walk. With me being so insistent, I had a change in therapists at the rehab, and I got someone who was more willing to let me try and walk in walking parallel bars and try and stand and stuff like that. But they really think that they still now, people that see me from the rehab many years later, because sometimes I get asked to go to a hospital or to go to rehab and talk to somebody who's just had an accident, to try and give them a bit of emotional support and whatever. And I get told off for giving them false hope. And I don't try and give them false hope. I just try and explain to them that you need to adapt and you need to try and work out the best way forward. Don't just give up. So if you decide the best way forward is, if you're paralyzed from the neck down and you can't do anything, and you're never going to be able to do anything, what is the best you can make out of that situation? Because it's not going to do you any good just to go into a total depression and totally give up. And it's easy for me to say that because I have a very, very easy life in comparison to a lot of people. I really do. And so it's easy for me to sit here and say, don't give up and don't this and don't that. But you really have to try and be positive. And there's a lot in the mind, and there's a lot that there's just a lot that you can get through if you really try. And, one of the big things is when I come up with something that I want to do, like an outrageous challenge or something, people always look and go, really? Seriously? Okay, no, let's stop being stupid. You asked me previously where the term walking quadriplegic comes from. And that was Oliver's nickname that he gave me. I'd known him over the years at therapy, and sort of interacted with him a little. I knew he had MS, but we sort of had different times. So I'd sort of catch him as he was leaving and I was starting, or whatever the case is. And then after my second neck trauma in 2017, I really felt like I'd gone backwards dramatically. When I had that second surgery, I had a lot of pain and a lot of problems with my right arm, and we noticed at physio that I was starting to get muscle wastage, and my movement on my right side was starting to get quite dramatically affected. So I was in a lot of pain, which I'd been fortunate enough never to be in pain before in my accident, except for the first 5 days. So I was very fortunate not to suffer from pain, and a lot of people suffer from tremendous pain. I didn't, which was very fortunate. But in 2017, I started to have all these issues with pain and whatever the case was. And started to have muscle wastage, which we worked out was trapped nerves in my neck, and I ended up having to go for that second surgery. When I came out of the second surgery, I could not move my right arm at all. So for the first probably 4 or 5 days, my right arm was totally dead. It wouldn't lift. Yeah. I couldn't move it. And that was sort of a major setback from, if you think somebody who managed to climb the stadium in 2012, all of a sudden 5 years later, I'm basically, I can't walk on a walking frame now because I can't stand, because I need both my arms to stand and push myself up on the walker. All of a sudden I'm stuck in a wheelchair because now I can't get up. And when we had the surgery, one of the things he said to me was, you always know there's a risk with surgery. You don't know whether you're going to have a problem. When we came out of surgery, he said to me, look, there weren't any complications. There weren't any problems. It seemed to have gone well. I'm not sure why you can't move your right arm at this stage. Maybe it's swelling or whatever. Let's just see how it goes. Unfortunately, within a week or so, it started to improve. But I came back to physio, and I just, for that sort of next year and a bit, I just felt I was going nowhere. Things were, I was able to walk with a walker and that, but things were just a bit stale. There was no challenge, there was no anything. And on the way to physio one morning, I was driving through to physio. It was probably about a year after I'd had that surgery, and I was listening to the radio driving through to physio, and they just announced that they just finished the East Coast Radio 5K walk. And I thought, oh, that's cool. I've always wanted to do that since I broke my neck. That's interesting. Would be quite nice to do that. So I promptly arrived at physio and told Mary, we're doing the East Coast walk next year. And she sort of looked at me and said, sorry, we what? And I said, we're doing the East Coast 5K next year on the walker. So she said to me, well, okay, yeah. And when I walked, my right foot dragged very badly. I always say it was like dragging a tree stump behind me, because I used to go through regularly wear through shoes because my right toes were basically dragging on the floor with my foot pointed out. And my leg was totally stiff, so I couldn't unlock my knee. I always say it was like taking Viagra and it went to the wrong place. So my knee was totally stiff, my leg was totally stiff, and I couldn't unlock my leg, couldn't unlock my right leg to basically walk. So with a walking frame, I used to, on my left leg could move forward, but my right side and my right leg was literally dragging behind me, sort of stuck out in a full lock position, and was very difficult to unlock. So Mary and I then took a walk around the gym and did our first training exercise about a year before the East Coast walk. And we managed to do 500 meters in an hour. I stopped 4 times. And I was literally dead on my feet. I think for the next 2 days, I couldn't walk. And Mary sort of looked at me and said, that's 500 meters in an hour. Just work that out logically, that to do the East Coasts based on that speed, you're going to take 10 hours to do the East Coast 5K. So I said, well, yeah, but, you just keep at it. And I've always approached things like that. To me, I've always had a love for racing and a passion for speed and stuff like that. So for me, this became a race car challenge. Like any motorsport event, I was the race car, and I needed to properly plan my strategy and where I was going to stop and how I was going to approach the race. And as long as I planned things properly and worked it all out, I was confident I was going to do it without an issue. And we literally, from the first... From the first training session, we timed it. And we literally, I still to this day time every walk that I do. I'm looking for improvement. And when I was slower one day, we would analyze it and work out why I was slower and what had changed and whatever the case is. And we just trained solidly for the year. By the time we finished, I think we'd done 300 hours worth of training and close to 275 kilometers of walking. And in May 2019, I walked the East Coast 5 kilometer, and it took me 5 hours and 38 minutes. But I did it, contrary to what people believed, and I proved all the people wrong that didn't think I would do it, and I managed to do it. So
tell me something, What were you, tell me about your childhood quickly. Just paint that picture for me. What were you like as a child? What was your childhood like? Your parents, how were they with you?
We had a fantastic childhood. We were very well looked after, very well loved by our parents. I was born overseas in England. I left when I was 4 and we moved to Zambia because my dad went and worked in Zambia on the mines. And we all moved to Zambia, and then in 1976, so it makes me very, very old. But in 1976, we moved to South Africa, and we've always lived in this area, and we had a great childhood. My parents were old school. We were naughty little kids, and we pushed them to the limit all the time. But my parents brought us up where we knew we respected my parents, and we were naughty kids, but we were also we were well brought up kids. My mom just used to give us that look that the old school parents gave you, and we knew we were in trouble. She didn't need to escalate it and tell us she was going to tell Dad, who would then discipline us. If Mom gave us the look, we knew it was time to behave. But of course, we pushed it to the limits wherever we could. Oh, yeah.
I wish my kids. I wish my kids would stop when I gave them the. Oh, sorry, there's a delay. Yeah.
You wish your kids would.
No, I'm
when
saying
you
I
gave
wish.
them the look. My mother's.
Yeah.
My mother still tells me today that I'm not too old for a good hiding. So there we go.
Yeah, so you knew the consequence would be a very good hiding.
No, 100%, 100%. Yeah. So we behaved. We took chances where we could and drove our parents nuts, and we got caught stealing my mother's car, and we did all sorts of naughty things that kids do, and all sorts of stupid things. But we had a great childhood. We really did.
Yeah.
We were well cared for. We were well loved, and we had a great childhood.
And we is how many of you?
There are 3 of us, a brother and a sister. My brother unfortunately passed away a number of years ago. So it's just my sister, and my folks are both still around. My dad actually turns 80 this month, and I hope I've got his genes because he looks nothing like 80. So I'm hoping that I've got Dad's genes.
So earlier on you said you spoke about fate, and you said you just, you felt it was just meant to be this. It was, there's, you forgot to put your seatbelt on. You never do. It was just down the road. Why do you think this happened to you, or needed to happen to you, or, in this philosophical...
I don't really think it needed to happen, or it just happens. Shit happens. I mean, there's nothing you can do about certain situations. People always, when I say it's fate, I don't mean that it was it happened. It was one of those things, and, just deal with it. I don't believe that certain things are laid down for us in life. If you put your fingers in the toaster, they're going to get burned. That's a fact. So actions have consequences. It was one of those things. I don't know why I didn't have my seatbelt on, and I'm sure life would have been differently if I had. It just happened. It is what it is. There's not much you can do about it. You can't change it. We move forward, eh?
Yeah. And tell me, you said you lost your brother. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, that's not something I really want to talk. Not something I'd like to talk about. But yeah, I lost my brother very close to the time that I had my accident. So my brother never found out about my accident. And that for me was, must be very hard for my folks, because obviously they had 2 tragedies to deal with in very close period of time. Wow. And I think for them, dealing with the loss of my brother, which was very, very hard for them, obviously, they had to be brave and had to sort of move on and concentrate on me, who'd suffered severe trauma but was still here. So that's why I say I always feel it's way harder for other people than it is for the person that's had the accident. My folks certainly had a lot more to deal with than I had to deal with. So,
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that. It's I've lost a brother too, so it's not something that certainly you talk about your folks and how your dad doesn't even look 80. To see how that affects your parents is it's a shocking experience to go through. So that if I know someone's gone through that, it like goes straight to my heart. I feel the.
Yeah, they say
that
the parents should never be burying their children, type of thing. And I think it was a very, very hard time for my folks, and obviously, as I say, a double tragedy for them, because suddenly they're dealing with a son that's going to potentially be permanently paralyzed, and big thing for them, so very, very, very hard time, so
yeah.
And I don't think you ever get over the loss of somebody, of a family member. I think that's always going to be something that's always going to be hard to deal with. Yeah.
But tell me on that note, because you are such a positive person, and also understanding your childhood, you were raised with so much love, and I can imagine that that's always given you also the strength that it's just always there, the support. Someone's always got your back. It's that feeling, right, that you have this love and energy supporting you as well. So it has a huge impact on human beings and the way they move forward with life, is if they've had the support of their parents, I believe. Obviously on the other side, one can get fueled by also not having had that support, but I'm just you're able to deal with yourself, and that's interesting. You're able to deal with your own stuff. You can deal with it. You make your decisions. You say you want to climb this, you say you want to walk that, and you go for it. But I am curious, because it's also often things happen to people that it's not in their control, as was your accident, but because it's you were able to cope with it. But in terms of like having lost someone that you love so incredibly, were you able to cope with that as well? Or were you just so busy surviving yourself, or did you have that same strength to cope with the loss?
Yeah, it was difficult, because you sort of, you always think to yourself, could we have, not that we weren't close or anything, we were a year apart, and we were close, but my brother spent a lot of his time, he lived overseas for a long time. He went overseas, he finished school when he was young. He finished school before me, although he was younger than me, and he went and did an apprenticeship as a mechanic, and ended up as a very good mechanic. And then he went overseas before I did. I joined him overseas, and then I came back, and he stayed over there. Eventually he moved back to South Africa. When I say we weren't close, we certainly were close. But you always think to yourself, could we have been closer? Could we have spent more time together? And I think you sort of regret the time and the opportunities that you lost. We had our separate interests and whatever the case is. And you always think to yourself, certainly, could we have, spent more time together, and regret that. It wasn't easy dealing with it, but I always felt I was trying to deal with my own stuff at the time, and you sort of you have to put on a brave face, because no matter what you're dealing with, the people around you who's supporting you are also dealing with a lot, and you don't want to try and make the situation worse for them. They're trying to cope with seeing you in a different situation, and they're trying to cope with all the emotions that they've got to deal with, relating to you. And as I say, I was very fortunate to have a very, very, very strong support team around me. Especially my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. I mean. to step up and say, well, I'm not going anywhere, is a big thing. And I can, there are people that have had accidents that their other half has disappeared in 5 minutes, and for me, that didn't happen. As I say, she made the stupid mistake of marrying me. It's hard for the people around you, so, and I get angry with I get very frustrated and very angry with a lot of things and not being able to do silly little things, like sometimes turn a tap off or whatever. Like the tap will get stuck and I can't turn the tap off, because I just don't have the strength to do it. And Taryn will walk through and turn off the tap like it's the easiest thing in the world. And I sort of look at that and get a bit frustrated, but the fact that it happens very rarely and that I can do most things, I realize I can't get frustrated at the small things because I'm lucky to be able to do what I want to do most of the time. If I want to go and have a cup of coffee, I can literally go home and make myself a cup of coffee. There are a lot of people that can't do that. So they sit there wanting a cup of coffee, but they've got to ask somebody to do it. And there's nothing worse than having to ask somebody to do every single thing for you. You just feel terrible, because that person, especially if that person has run off their feet trying to cope with everything else that's going on in their lives and do everything else. As I say, my wife runs a whole farm on her own. We have a 6-acre farm that she mows on her own with a push mower with no help of staff. She looks after up to 11 horses on her own with no grooms. Runs the whole household and puts up with all my nonsense. You don't want to put more on their plate because they do so much as it is. So, being able to do stuff for yourself is a bonus. Being able to drive, not having to ask somebody, I need to go somewhere. Can you drive me there? Can you feed me? Can you shave me? That type of stuff. I realize how lucky I am, and it's a big thing. I really do feel guilty the moment I sort of get a bit frustrated or get a bit sort of not depressed with life, because I'm not really that type of person, but just get a bit, sometimes it's a bit much type of thing. Then you start feeling guilty because you think you've got no right to feel like that because you can do so much for yourself. Snap out of it. Get yourself sorted out. Stop being an idiot. You're very fortunate and very lucky, and you need to realize that. So
I've heard you say quite a few times feeling guilty. This association and this connection with the sense within you of feeling guilty. Like, where does that come from?
I don't know. I just feel there's always somebody worse off than you. You don't really have the right to complain if guaranteed I can find somebody worse off than you in 5 minutes. Sure, there's always somebody better off than you, but there's always somebody worse off than you. Just be grateful for what you have, and situations are difficult and whatever the case is, but I can do so much. I can't feel sorry for myself, and I just feel too guilty because other people would trade places with me tomorrow. I can tell you 10, 15 people that would love to be able to jump in a car and drive and can't. Oliver can't drive himself. So, Oliver would love to be able to drive himself, I'm sure. So I can drive myself. I can't moan about my situation, and sure, I can't race anymore, but at this point, and I lost what was a big part of my life before, but I can still do so much, so.
And have you always been this positive person, having this positive outlook? Have you always had that, or have you had to come to learn to be like this?
I don't really think it's a positive outlook. I think it's just stubborn, I'm really just I'm that stubborn and determined that I won't be beaten. I always say that if I'm a bit thick-headed, so I feel that if my hand got cut off, I'd probably think I could grow another one. Which obviously I can't, but I'd probably be convinced that I could eventually grow another hand or something stupid. I'm just so stubborn that people still think I'm in denial, but if I'm in denial, I'm in denial. It's been 16, 17 years, and if that's the way I cope with a situation, then that's the way I cope with it. I still don't believe, as you know, that I'm paralyzed, and
well, what is it that
you,
when you say you're stubborn and in denial, and you say it with such energy also and conviction, what is it that you don't want to be? Like, what don't you want to be?
I don't want to be beaten. I'm always, I won't say I'm always disappointed in myself. I'm not always disappointed in myself, but I always feel I can do better. Moses Mabida was an example. I felt I should have done it in under an hour. When I did the East Coast 5K, for me, the goal was to do it in under 5 hours. It took me 5 hours 38. So when I finished it, was I happy I finished it? And was I proud that I finished it? Sure, 100%. But was I disappointed? 100%. I always feel I could have done better. It's never enough. Enough is never enough. You can always push yourself harder. You can always do more. I'm never going to be satisfied no matter what.
Has that ever driven you? Has it ever driven you in a negative way? Has it ever not driven you in a negative way, but has it ever led you to a negative place? That idea of I never want to be beaten.
In a way, because you're never satisfied. So you're always kind of a little bit frustrated. I think I've got some form of OCD. My wife says it is definitely impossible. I'm the messiest person on the planet, and there's no way that I've got OCD being so messy. She curses me because of my business, my Porsche parts business. I've got parts spread all over the house. So our dining room, for example, is full of steering wheels, which I've promised her over the past probably 3 or 4 years that I'm cleaning up next weekend. And it never, ever happens. I think I've probably put more steering wheels in there over the years than I've taken out. So, in a way, I suppose the negative side of it is that you're never satisfied. But the positive side of it is that I always feel I can do better. So I go to gym every time thinking I can be stronger. I can push more weights. I can do whatever. And I'll have a bad day, and I don't really get frustrated to the point of getting depressed about a bad day. I just think, well, okay, that's a bad day. You didn't have a great day today at gym. Things weren't well. It wasn't an easy day. Just next day will be a better day. Just do better next time. Just push yourself harder next time. Just get over it. You'll sort yourself out. You have a bad walk. My body after the accident does some very strange things. And even the physiotherapist, we laugh and always say that I'm wired backwards since the accident, and that certain things just don't work. And then for some reason, like, I'll have my best walk ever, and I'll do my fastest time and my best walk ever. And then 2 days later, I'll get a back spasm and I won't be able to stand in the wheelchair. So I'll be stuck in a wheelchair for a week or 2 weeks, and we can't work out why it's happened or what's happened. And then suddenly out of the blue, I'll be up and walking again and do my best time. It is what it is. You just deal with it as you sort of go along and learn to adapt and make a plan. I mean, it gets frustrating when you can't do what you used to do. And when in 2017, when my neck got really bad, it got very frustrating. It got very, being back in a wheelchair was depressing in a way. certainly. It gets you down, you know. You just got to, I just get angry and try and move forward. You know, I find anger helps me. Being a bit angry about it instead of being depressed about it. Yeah. That anger helps fuel me. Yeah. You know, so
it's nice to hear that also, you know, also for people listening. Because in society and in life, you know, we get so brainwashed growing up, and, you know, just the messages out there, you know, growing up of, you know, it's not good to show anger. And, you know, as children, often children are taught that, you know, not to show anger, not to show pain, not to show these emotions that are actually, like you say, you use anger to fuel you. And it's nice, you know, for people to also, you know, who are going through a hard time at the moment, to maybe try and find a bit of that anger inside them, you know, and actually realize, like, am I being, you know, because a lot of the time people go towards the depressed route, right? So it's nice for them to sort of say, well, okay, that hasn't been working for me. Let me like try and access that anger button and let's see if that works for me, you know, and try and see if that can fuel me forward. It's nice to hear you verbalize that.
Yeah, you know, this year is 17 years since my accident, and I over the last 17 years, when I first had the accident, I remember it happened in November the 21st, and I always sort of first thought I'd be home by Christmas and be walking by Christmas. That obviously didn't happen. It took a long time. I'd say a long time. It took at least 6-7 months before I was standing and able to do anything on a walking frame. When we decided to get married, I always said to my wife, I never want to get married until I can walk down the aisle. And not that I ever wanted to. I always told my friends jokingly I'd never walk down the aisle and I'd never get married. Well, guess I'm a magician, because I could predict the future that I wasn't going to walk down an aisle. So when we decided to get married, I always said to Taryn, I don't want her to think that I'm marrying her just to have a permanent nurse around. Yeah. So I didn't want to get married until I could walk down the aisle. Well, I always tell her that she wanted to get married quickly because she was convinced I was going to die, and she wanted to make sure she was getting the life insurance. But yeah, you know, we got married my accident was in November, and we got married in February. So it was a short time after the accident that we actually got married. And over the last sort of 17 years, when I first had the accident, I used to go to physio 5 days a week, and I'd go to probably 2 or 3 different physios a day. So in the morning, I'd go and see a physiotherapist for my hands, and then in the afternoon or later that day, I would go and see another physiotherapist to do some other form of exercise, and then I'd come home, have lunch, and then in the afternoon, I would go to gym and try and do whatever I could in the gym. You know, I was in a wheelchair still, and the gym were very unhappy that I was arriving in a wheelchair wearing a neck brace, and that I was trying to jump on and off machines and play with weights. And I was, you know, my hands didn't work properly, so I'd bandage weights into my hands and drop them on my head and all sorts of things. And they were not that happy about it, and made me sign liabilities that if I basically killed myself on the gym floor, that I wouldn't hold them liable for it. And I fell off machines and literally dropped weights on my chest and all sorts of stupid things over the years. But I always sort of, I look back over the last 17 years, and, you know, as sort of time went on, you do less and less because life takes over and work takes over. And sometimes you just can't get to gym because you're too busy working or whatever the case is. And I always sit back and look at the last 17 years and think, would I be much further along if I put in more effort? You know, up until when we started training for the East Coast Walk, which was in 2018, I couldn't walk more than 500 meters with the walking frame. And as I say, my right leg used to drag very, very badly. And that to me was sort of something that not that I was never going to get over, but I mean, we tried all sorts of things and it just never ever improved. And then the more walking we put in, the walking just became easier. And the more we were out there trying and pushing and making effort, suddenly the leg and the foot started lifting a little bit. And Mary and I were very shocked when it started lifting. We couldn't work out how I changed my style of walking or how I'd managed to get the foot to lift, but it lifted a little bit, and then it used to fatigue. And now I walk now. I come and walk 3 times a week, and at the moment I'm doing what I call a time trial, where I'm only walking for an hour, and I'm trying each time to walk further and further during that hour, because I believe firmly that not only will I go back and do the East Coast a second time in under 5 hours, I've set a goal to do it in under 3 hours next time, not 5. I'll do it in under 3. So that's when all this COVID nonsense stops and the East Coast walk becomes a thing that I can do again 1 year. I'm determined to go out there and do it in under 3 hours. And I look at the way my walking has improved, and I look at how much time I spend in the gym now. And jokes aside, I mean, I'm getting stronger every day. I see improvements in the gym. I see improvements with my walking. I'm just getting stronger and stronger. And I wonder if I put in a lot of effort initially, and I put in a lot of effort over the years. But there were times I had breaks and life got the better of me, and I didn't put in as much effort. And I sit back and think to myself, well, what if I'd put in more effort? What if I could have been what I call a science experiment? So what if the day I broke my neck, I could have had the world's best physios around me and the world's best scientists and the world's best everything, and all they'd done is concentrate on my health and my recovery? And what if that's all I'd done? So I didn't have to worry about work. I didn't have to worry about money. I didn't have to worry about life. All I did was physio. Where would I be? And that's one of the sort of messages for me that comes out of this whole thing is, what if you hadn't made the effort? What if you hadn't tried? So you break your neck and you decide to yourself, well, this is me. This is my sort of deal in life now. And this is my fate, and I'm not going to make an effort. And interestingly, when we were in physio, in rehab, I remember this young guy came into rehab in a wheelchair once, as what they call a day patient. So he would come back and just be there for a few hours for the day, and then go away and go back home. And he came in a wheelchair, and young guy in his 20s, I'd say. And I remember looking at him, and when I had my accident, I was slightly older, so I'd lived some form of life. It didn't happen to me in my 20s, although I like to think I still look 30. I know I probably look slightly older, and I always joke with my physiotherapist that I've owned this body for 30 years, so I know exactly what's going on with it. Obviously owned it for slightly longer than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this young guy in his 20s came into the gym, and he was pushed in a wheelchair by his dad. And if you're in a wheelchair and you can push yourself, having somebody push you is quite frustrating. You want to push yourself. You don't want somebody to push you. So if you can push you, you're not, when people offer to help, I'm always very grateful in that, but you do want to do things yourself. And I remember seeing his dad pushed him in, and then he climbed out of the wheelchair and stood up on the parallel bars. And I remember thinking, wow, okay, the dude can stand. Why was he being pushed in the wheelchair? And the first thing, as either a paraplegic or a quadriplegic, if you see someone else in a wheelchair, the first thing I look at is their hands. So if their hands are all functional, and then they're a paraplegic. So they have a lot of hand functionality. They can do stuff. Their hands are all good. So I remember looking at his hands and thinking, well, he's definitely not a quad, because his hands, there's no muscle wastage. His hands look good. He looks all fine and whatever. And he stood up on the parallel bars. And then he proceeded to walk around on crutches. And I thought, wow, hey, cool, the dude's on crutches. Okay, maybe he can't walk long distances, and that's why he came in a wheelchair. And then I noticed a little bit later on, he stopped to have something to eat, and his dad was feeding him. And I thought, that's a bit weird. Why is his dad feeding him? His hands work.
Yeah.
Why is he letting his dad feed him? And I remember quietly saying to one of the physios, what's the story with that dude? Because he looks like he can walk with crutches pretty well. He looks like he can stand. When I stand, I push up or for either a walking frame or parallel bars. I can't stand on my own using my leg power. He looked like he could stand without using his arms. So I was a bit confused as to why he was being fed. And I sort of quietly asked, and she said, oh, he can actually walk with crutches. He chooses not to. He sits at home and watches TV basically all day and comes in for the odd physio because he's forced to come in. But he can actually walk with crutches. He's not confined to a wheelchair. But he is paralyzed in a way that he probably couldn't walk 3Ks on crutches. So he probably does need the wheelchair on a part-time basis. Yes. But he certainly didn't need to be fed. And he certainly didn't need to be cared for in the way he was being cared for. He made that choice. And to me, that kind of made me angry because he was given an opportunity and he just wasted it. I mean, there's so many people out there that if I didn't make an effort to try and better my situation, there's so many people out there who would absolutely kill to be in my position and have the opportunity to stand on a walking frame and have the opportunity to get into a car and drive. Who am I to waste that opportunity and to waste that privilege? Walking, standing, that's a privilege. That's not you might think it's a basic human right. It's not something you can take for granted if it gets taken away from you. And if it gets taken away from you and you've got the opportunity to potentially stand again and to potentially walk again, seriously, are you gonna waste that opportunity? I saw a guy at the gym once complaining, running on the treadmill, complaining on how difficult it was. And as I walked past him, I said to him, dude, run because you can. Some of us would love the opportunity. And just kept walking. Because really, seriously, run because you can. Some of us would kill to be able to run. Just to be able to do that again, to be able to get out and run and, you don't waste your opportunities that you're given. I'll never waste my opportunity to go to the gym. There are days that I curse and I get to the gym and I literally drag my sorry ass around that gym, and every single exercise feels like somebody's put triple the weight on, and I just can't wait to get through it and get home. But I never want to waste that opportunity of being able to go to the gym or being able to go to physio or being able to do something, It's just, you don't have the right to waste that opportunity. You really don't. It's just, I don't know. Sort of,
Well, it's been, Jim, I mean, I think that this is also, what everyone's hearing now through this is, you've known, but you knew it before anyway. You were training before anyway, 5 days a week, you said. Exercise and physical health. I think most people know this nowadays, right? Because there's just so much always said about it. But, it's physical health, exercise. It's all that is so much a part of supporting this positive mindset, which you've known innately. You tapped into that before the accident anyway. It wasn't that after the accident you started to train for the first time. You've always known that that's important.
Yeah, 100%. And I've always been, I was never a big gym person, sort of all my life. I was quite a skinny kid through my school years, and never seemed to be able to put on weight and whatever the case is, and wasn't really that active. I played a bit of sport. I did a little bit of running. I've always liked soccer, so I played a bit of soccer, but I smoked when I was younger, and I drank when I was younger, so I wasn't an incredibly fit person or whatever the case is. And then I got cancer in about 1990, 1991. I got lymphatic cancer, either Hodgkin's or non-Hodgkin's, whichever's the better one of the two. I got the better one of the two, and I had cancer for a number of years, and it wasn't a difficult period at all during my life. I had cancer. They discovered it. It was there. Life went on. We got it sorted out, and I was fortunate enough to be clear of it within a few years. And then I sort of started going to gym when they first opened the gym up in Kloof. It was the first sort of time that we had a big gym in our area. I'd been to gym a few times in the past, but always felt a bit awkward being the skinny little dude that I was, going to gym and seeing all these serious guys out there pushing weights. And, I was never one of those guys. And after the cancer, I was sort of very skinny, and I just decided to join the gym one day when they opened the local gym, and just sort of, got in there and realized there were also other people in there that were either skinny or fat and out of shape. And, the main thing wasn't what you looked like. The main thing was to actually pitch up on the day and to make an effort. And I firmly believe that when I see people in the gym nowadays, that it's not all about what you look like. It's about the fact that you're actually there in the gym. So whether you weigh 200 kgs or whether you're the most super fit looking person on the planet, it doesn't make a difference. The fact that you're actually in the gym and you're trying your best and you put in as much effort as you can, it's not all about how much weight you're pushing or whatever. It's just about the fact you're there and you're doing the best that you can. You're putting in your best effort. And I started to love the gym, and I started to see results in the gym, and it became a sort of a challenge for me to be better, to be stronger, to be faster. And certainly more so when the accident happened. When the accident happened, I just couldn't wait all I wanted to do was get back in the gym. That was my exercise was something that had made me stronger and given me some discipline. And the gym was a big foundation for me in my recovery. I had a number of years, a long time off the gym. I only recently, I'd say in the last sort of year and a half, have been back in the gym on a full-time sort of basis. And I realized how much I missed it. And, when I started training to do the walk, I started putting in that effort to do that. And we did a lot of walking. I was walking 5 days a week. And then once we completed the walk, I wanted to change things up a bit. So I decided, well, I still need to walk, because if I don't walk, literally, like when the first lockdown came, I was unable to get out and walk properly at physio, because trying to walk at my house with 5 insane dogs and dogs trying to knock you over every 5 minutes and be part of the walk and part of the exercise is just, it's a no-no. There's no discipline. I don't know what happened to discipline in my family when it came to animals. There's absolutely no discipline in our family when it comes to animals. Our dogs run riot. My wife laughs and says, I'm the next. The dogs look at me not as the boss, but as another husky, because we've got huskies. So I'm just another husky in the pack they can laugh at and not listen to. So trying to sort of walk at home during lockdown was a big issue, and I regressed terribly when I couldn't walk and couldn't get to the gym. So the moment lockdown stopped and the gyms opened and I could get back to physio and back to the gym, it's important for me. It's also important. The gym for me is a mental escape. It's an escape from work. It's an escape from life. And it's just somewhere that I go where I don't tend to answer my phone. Even if it's customers phoning, I tend to ignore my phone. Most of the time, I just put on some music and I just have a 2-hour session where I really just don't care about life or about anything or about whatever problems are going on. A lot of times it helps me work through issues I'm having with work, trying to solve something, or issues I'm having with whatever. The gym helps me sort it out. You know, challenging myself to walk further, faster every time helps me to sort it out. So, yeah.
So, Mark, so right now, because you've gone through all these, different challenges that you've gone through and the phases, but so right now where you're at, because now I have all this perspective. So you can walk with a walker. And so you were explaining your hands in the beginning. Your hands can move. You can do things. So just in very nutshell form, just tell me exactly physically what you can do now. I just want to, in 5 years' time or 2 years' time, when I interview you again, we can recall this next sentence. But just physically, what are you doing right now physically?
So physically, I can walk with a walking frame, but I cannot stand unaided. So I could, if I'm sitting on a couch and I don't have the walking frame in front of me, I cannot physically stand up. I need to strengthen my arms in order to push my upper body into an upright position. I have what a lot of quads and paras suffer from is a very weak middle section, so a very weak core. In my case, the muscles on my right side, my stomach tends to bulge out quite badly on the right, where the core muscles aren't very strong on the right-hand side. So my core is not great. I'm at the moment trying to train at gym to do more sort of core work in order to strengthen my core and strengthen my balance. My hands work to the point where I'm left-handed, so I can write. My writing's not fantastic, but I can write with my left hand. I can make myself a cup of coffee. I struggle with some of the very sort of finer movements. So when putting a cap back on a bottle, it tends to be a little bit of a mission for me. I drop the cap probably 3 or 4 times. Sometimes, other times I can do it easily. But the finer movements are a little bit difficult for me. My right hand is at a point where I probably wouldn't safely pick up a coffee cup with my right hand because I'd probably drop it. The grip on my right hand is not fantastic. I can't get my right hand into a proper full-blown fist with all my fingers closing. But I'm working on that, and I've seen improvements in that area. I still can't feel hot and cold. With my left, I can get my left into a fist, as you can sort of see there. I can then move my hand like that, and I can open my fingers, but my thumb still, my thumb does that. And I also can do a potty trick like that, where I can put my thumb on top of my fist, which not everybody can do. Strangely enough, on the other hand, sorry, I'm always fidgety. I don't sit still. On the other hand, my fingers work, but that finger won't go down. So I cannot bend that finger at the joint properly, and the thumb is also a little bit collapsed. There's still, as you can see on the back of my hands, quite a bit of muscle wastage. My wrists tend to move, so I do have that wrist movement. I've got obviously shoulder, elbow movements. I still have wastage on the back of this shoulder, and I still have wastage that I lost in 2017 on my right elbow that never came back.
Okay.
So just in my original injury was C4, C5, C6. So basically they welded C4 to C5 with some using some mesh and some wire mesh and some hip bone, which I always joke around. They stole my hip bone without paying for it. And then they also repaired some damage to T1. When I had the second op, they discovered that discs had badly degenerated between 4 and 5. So they then put in a second cage and they welded vertebrae 4 to 5. So now 4, 5, and 6 are all welded together. At the same time, he discovered that vertebra 1, 2, and 3 had totally calcified on their own. So they'd all welded themselves together. They think from potentially maybe some blood or something that was in the injury that had obviously calcified over the years. So my 1, 2, and 3 vertebrae are totally welded together. I have a gap between 3 and 4, and then 4, 5, and 6 are totally welded together. So the fact that I can still turn my head and move my neck is quite impressive because of the amount of welding that's gone on in my neck. And it potentially I could further down the years have a problem between 3 and 4, and they may potentially have to weld the whole lot together. You just don't know with a neck injury what's going to happen. So things could
this
change,
is all at the top. When you talk about the CE,
yes.
I mean, I did do biology, but you forget all these details, right? But this is the
basically we're the top. So we're one is obviously at the very base of your skull and goes down from there. 5 and 6 is sort of around where the bottom of your neck, where it joins onto your shoulders, kind of thing. In that type of region is where the main damage is. I've got quite a few lumps at the back there where, there's obviously calcified bone and stuff going on there. And my neck creaks a lot and, it's held on. So, it is what it is.
Well, we're going to have to interview you in a couple of years' time and hear what, when I ask that same question, what different you're going to say.
Yeah, everybody keeps asking me, what's the next challenge? What's the next challenge? But I'm not sure at this stage. I've sort of, the mid-mile as being something I've contemplated, and I can't swim very well. So the mid-mile has been something that I've sort of toyed around in my mind a bit about potentially doing. But at the moment, if I decide to do that,
interrupt them, Mark.
The
just for people listening, the mid-mile, because not everyone's from South Africa who listens to the show. The mid-mile is just, well, you can explain what it is, but just so people understand what you're saying. And also for the people listening, we do have this on YouTube as well, guys. So if you're wanting to see the examples of what Mark was saying with his hands, and obviously just go to the YouTube channel because this is recorded. So just so you guys know, go there and obviously you can see the visuals as well. But yeah, Mark, what's the mid-mile?
The mid-mile is basically a mile swim. So, and as a lot of people will know, swimming fitness is totally different. So you can be the biggest boy in the gym and the most muscly guy around, but if you're not doing sort of cardio fitness and stuff like that, then your walk between the gym and the car becomes an effort. So it's all a different type of fitness, and swimming is a totally different type of fitness. I mean, you use all sorts of little muscles that you'd never ever used before. So the mid-mile being a mile swimmer is something that I've contemplated. But at this stage, it would mean I'd have to sort of change my whole training routine and potentially stop as much walking as I'm doing and as much gym as I'm doing in order to change things up a bit to do the swim.
Yeah.
And I'm just not there yet. I'm quite happy in my sort of walking and my gym, where I don't really want to change up to do this, the swimming and the amount of effort that it would put into to do the swim. But certainly not something that I haven't sort of thought about, and probably something I will do somewhere down the line. I just like to get a few other things. I'm making improvements in other areas, and as I said, I'd like to do the East Coast 5K in under 3 hours when that's so I'm doing a lot of walking towards that. and spending a lot of time in the gym. If you're in a wheelchair, the more sort of time you spend getting stronger arms, stronger triceps, stronger biceps, stuff like that, the more your life improves, the more mobility you get. I still have to sort of pick my body up from a wheelchair to the couch. I don't do it using a lot of leg. So it's a lot of upper body. So the more upper body strength I have, the stronger I am upper body wise, the easier my life becomes. And the easier things like wheelchair transfers come, and the easier standing up becomes. So yeah, at this stage, I'm fairly happy with how things are going and how much training I put in. I do 6 days a week. I take 1 day off. After this, I'll go back to the office quickly, make sure that the place hasn't burnt down and that there's nothing urgent I need to do. And then I'll go and do a two and a half hour gym session this afternoon.
And just a quick one with this is now we're going to close off soon. I wanted to ask you earlier, just in terms of that sense of shame or embarrassment, has that ever got in your way? I know you say you don't like to be on the floor, you don't like your wife to turn the tap, but I mean in a more public way, you talk about people do respond differently to you when they see you being a person on a wheelchair. But have you ever been affected by shame or embarrassment of, your arms or your hands not working properly, or because, you do the party trick and you say it as a joke with it behind your, you put it behind your, I can't do it. But, do you, yeah, but, have you ever been affected by shame or embarrassment in a way that's upset you?
Yeah, 100%. People always look at you totally differently. Look, I've always had funny hair. So I've always been a person that's had really weird hair. My wife always jokes when she first met me, it looked like I was trying to grow some type of mushroom on my head. And that's evolved into my customary mohawk, which is something that, I've always got a mohawk, and sometimes it's pink, and when I did the walk, it was pink, sort of because of the whole cancer thing. But so I'm used to people staring at me a little bit strangely, but you do feel a bit awkward and a bit weird, and especially if you see me in the gym. A lot of the machines that I use in the gym, I can't grip properly with my hands. So when I do, for example, some type of pull down, I can't pull down the machine by holding onto it with my hands because I don't have the hand strength that when I'm trying to pull down the weights that my hands actually hold onto the sort of machine pulling it down. So for example, when I grip the machine, I hook the bar under my wrist, as it were, and I pull it down using my wrists and not using my hands. So and I've just adapted to use certain machines in certain ways. And I jump on and off machines sort of off the walking frame, and it's quite awkward for me to get on and off certain machines. I look a little bit like an orangutan in a circus, climbing on and off, some of the stuff. And I get very, very strange looks in the gym. And I've got quite a bit of muscle wastage in the lower parts of my arms. And I know people sort of look at you a bit weirdly in the gym, and sort of because of that, they're looking at you because you are different. And yeah, sometimes you feel a bit awkward and whatever the case is. But I think over the years, I've sort of, I've toughened up. I don't like being in the wheelchair at all. If I ever go out in the wheelchair, I don't like it at all. I feel quite trapped in the wheelchair. And it's quite strange because you're not actually, the wheelchair, is not something that traps you. It's something that gives you freedom. It makes you mobile if you're a quadriplegic or a paraplegic. So it's not a device that actually traps you. But I do feel, if I have back spasms where I can't get out the wheelchair for 3 weeks or 2 weeks, that frustrates me a lot, and I kind of feel trapped in whatever the case is, not being able to stand up. So, yeah, you do feel awkward, and sometimes you do feel a bit embarrassed. A lot of people offer to help, especially getting in and out of the car. And a lot of people are shocked when they see me getting in and out of the car, because the type of car I drive, they don't expect me to get out of the car with a wheelchair. A lot of people come over. When I say a wheelchair, I mean with a walking frame. A lot of people, I think, come over to tell me that I'm not allowed to park in the parking, and suddenly realize that I am actually allowed, because I am paralyzed, and getting out with a walking frame. They don't expect to see you park in the parking. And a lot of people offer to help. And I always, some people get very frustrated when being in a wheelchair, when people offer to help you. I don't look at it that way. I think the people are just actually trying to be kind and trying to be nice. And I'm always very respectful and very grateful whenever people offer me help. And 99% of the time, I always say, no, thank you, thanks very much, but I really do appreciate you offering. And I honestly do feel that way. I do. I really do appreciate the old lady that stops seeing me climb out the car and saying, can I help you at all? Or the car guard that asks me if I can, if he can help me do something, putting the walker in or taking the walker out. There's some other people, they really just don't have a clue. I had an incident a while ago where I was actually, I was in the wheelchair a while ago and going somewhere, and I was wheeling back to the car. And I can't get the wheelchair in and out of the car myself, especially the current car that I drive. The wheelchair doesn't fit, but the car I had at the time, the wheelchair would fit in the boot. So I just, when I got to the car, I jump in the car and then shout to the car guard and ask him just to throw the wheelchair in the boot. Yeah. Because it's very rare that I take the wheelchair out. But on the way down to the car, I was busy pushing the wheelchair, and the car guard came behind me and decided he was going to help me push. So he proceeded to suddenly help me push at high speed, and then just let go of me on this quite steep downhill. So there I was flying down the hill, totally out of control in the wheelchair, and basically crashed into the car when I got to the bottom because I couldn't stop. Because he just didn't have a clue. He just pushed me and then let go of me. And, a lot of people just don't have a clue. But as I say, I really honestly do appreciate people offering and asking. They're just trying to be kind. They're just trying to be helpful. And you can't get angry with them for trying to help. And that you really, even if you want to do it yourself, you just have to politely, accept the fact they are just trying to be nice to you.
Yeah. But so in closing on that and now closing off, I mean, what advice and how do you actually then, in your mind, what is the little conversation that you have with yourself in your head when you are feeling that shame or that embarrassment? How do you reprogram yourself to get right again or to get past that moment?
Just stop caring about what everyone else thinks. You've been laughed at.
But do you say that in your head?
For the past...
Yeah, but at that moment where you're feeling shame, you say that in your head. You say, Mark, just stop it. Don't worry about what those people think.
What can you do about it? Just stop worrying about it. People have been laughing at your hair for a long, long time, long before you were paralyzed. Now you're just giving them something else to think about. Seriously, just get on with it. Stop stressing about it. I go to the gym. My main competitor in the gym and my main competitor in any challenges is not the person opposite me. It's me. I don't really need to beat you or beat that person pushing more weight than me. I just need to beat me. I need to be better than me every single time I go into that gym or I start walking. I need to be stronger, faster. I need to be better than the last time. And I always need to be better. And I've just got myself to beat. It's not about beating anyone else, although I certainly look at people in the gym pushing weights and I think, I can push a bit more than that. And I'm broken but not beaten, as it were. So a part of me does want to beat other people and be better than other people and stronger than a normal person who doesn't have an injury. But it's not the be-all and end-all. The be-all and end-all is to beat myself. I've just got to be better every time. There's just there's no choice. It is what it is. That's it.
Cool, Mark.
All right. Well, nice to talk to you, Jen. Nice to finally have a conversation that we didn't have to have all the interruptions and all the problems. So nice that we finally got through it.
Well, and now I know why, because you just don't give up. So you made goddamn sure that this conversation was still going to happen. Cool. Yeah, really cool to chat. And we'll keep in touch. Just send me lots of pictures so we can use those in our footage and our reels and stuff that we create from this. And I look forward to just reconnecting later on and seeing where you go. But I think that what's also cool is you don't have to swim the mid-mile. Like you've already beaten yourself. You've already won. And I think just your
you can always be
balanced. Better. Cool. Well, let's end on that. You can always be better, and I think that that's a good drive for human beings, right? It's just that little push, because it's good. It keeps us going. It keeps us alive. Keeps us challenged.
100%. As Oliver says, don't limit your challenges, challenge your limits. You can always be better.
Yeah, nice. Well, please thank Mary for letting us use her internet.
I shall. And I'll when I sign off now, I'll remember to wait until it all tells me what to do and what not to do. 100%.
Yeah.
I've also
hang up.
We were fortunate. I'll do that. We were fortunate enough at the Moses Mabhida climb to have a TV crew there. So we've got video footage of that. And we've also got video footage from the walk. So I'll send all that through to you.
Awesome. Please, my guys will create amazing content from it.
Perfect. I'll send it all through to you.
All right. Cool, Mark. Have a good day. You too. Hey, thanks.
You too.
Okay.
Cheers, eh?
Bye.
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 Let's see where this all might lead. I said life is for living. Let's see where this all might